Welcome to Bread and Thread, a podcast about food and domestic history. I'm Liz.
And I'm Hazel. We are two friends who studied archaeology together and love history, food history, domestic history, and also making stuff, historical or not. So, what have you been up to before we get to the main topic?
I finished my Halloween cross stitch,
Excellent.
which is unreasonably exciting.
Okay. Did you tell me about this or have I forgotten?
I put it was in my last craft diary video.
Okay, right. I haven't gotten around to that yet, so I will do that ASAP. Um,
So yeah,
cool.
I think that's the only thing I've actually completed. I've mostly just been working on stuff because I do big projects.
Hey. I support that. I feel like
But I
everyone listening who crafts can
yeah,
relate.
I did finish the back of the Knives Out jumper, so I'm officially a third of the way through the Knives Out jumper. So much cabling. The final thing's gonna weigh about 1.2 kilos based on how
That
much wool. It was a whole 400-gram ball just for the back of this jumper.
oh, that is a lot of warmth.
Like, it's a men's large,
Uh-huh.
but it's also a lot of cabling. Like, I've made jumpers this size before with the same gauge, and they did not take a 400-gram ball for just the back.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. It's gonna be the warmest jumper.
That's a blanket.
It is. It's a wearable weighted blanket, basically.
That actually makes it sound amazing.
See, now I'm wondering if there's a way to incorporate some sort of weighting into a regular jumper. There probably is.
Probably, yeah.
Like a thunder shirt for humans.
Oh, you can get that weighted cord, right? You could definitely sew that into a hem
Oh.
or something.
Or even just, like, hold it double with the yarn for a bit.
Depends how thick your yarn is. I don't know how thin they do that cord. Um,
I reckon you could do a weighted Gansey.
but that's one to look up, I think.
That is. What have you been up to?
Um, not as much baking as I'd like because of being busy and stuff and having a social life. Oh,
You make it sound like
sucks.
we have nothing going on.
I know. But I've started making some Christmas decorations
Ooh.
and stuff. Well, and things that I can send to people as presents. Which is cool, but that means I can't talk about it on this podcast because you're getting one of them. Um,
What?
yeah. Um, so apart from that, yeah, kind of not that much. I'm having a bit of a dry spell, I have to say. I need to get my rose hips out of the freezer and do the rose hip syrup, but it's just getting a clear day to do that because I feel like I'm gonna need a while to sort out everything because it involves like a fine jelly bag and leaving things to like drip and
Oh, yeah.
sterilizing bottles and all of that jazz. So yeah. It's kind of a fallow time for for that kind of stuff, I think. Um, but I'm kind of mad that I've missed the blackberries.
Well, we're just coming to the end of blackberry season because obviously it's a bit later in the north.
Mhm.
So, because there's a couple of brambles that grow right next to the tram stop, so sometimes you just grab one, you know?
I know. Free food is always good food.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm foraging like the ancestors.
I love doing that. Like I go out foraging, like berry picking and stuff. I'm just like, oh yes, so connected to my rural ancestors. And then I go home to my like central heating and my um like cozy
Yeah, I'm sure your rural ancestors would have killed for central heating.
yeah.
So what are we learning about this week?
Um so I picked one of our master lists this week. I'm gonna talk about snails.
Oh, effervescent.
Effervescent indeed. I feel like you need to put that rug up as the teaser image.
I mean, it does now have most of the lettering. I need to adjust it on the frame, but it says effervesce at the moment.
That's like a command. I can do that.
I'm
um,
not sure I wanna witness that.
well, I'll just leave you to imagine it. And instead, I'm going to give you a little French children's rhyme about
Okay.
snails because I found this in the course of my research and it was adorable. I'm actually going to try and do it in French as well because it is quite short and I feel like I can probably make an attempt. So the French goes, un petit escargot pose son... Oh no, petit escargot porte sur son dos sa maisonnette. Aussitôt qu'il pleut, il est tout heureux, il lève sa tête. But like you sing it.
Mhm.
And I've forgotten the tune, but I will put a link to a video because it's adorable. Anyway, in French, this means little snail carries on its back its little house. As soon as it rains, he gets happy. He comes out of his shell.
That's adorable.
This is so cute. Anyway, so that is my segue into talking about snail middens in the Paleolithic period.
Oh. Oh, shell middens excite me, is the thing.
I know, right? So much
Archaeology
archaeological
for
nerdery.
Nick's doing
Apologize.
his face.
Apologies to anyone who did not come to this podcast to listen to two grown people enthuse about snail middens.
I mean, if you did, what are you even here for?
I mean, I feel like our listener base is people that would want to hear that. That is true. So welcome, fellow snail nerds.
Snerds.
Is that going to become our annoying cutesy nickname for our listener base?
It can if we say it enough.
I think that way danger lies. So snails, as it turns out, are among other things very high in protein, and so were really useful in the hunter-gatherer diet. I'm going to be talking about snails from the perspective of being eaten as food, as like ornamentation, decoration, and as medicine a little bit as well. So we have a deeper relationship with snails than one might realize. Um, Snails, I think, are probably best known for like the French dish of escargot,
Mhm.
which I will get to later. But they've actually been eaten for thousands and thousands of years because, as I said, they're high in protein. If you're a hunter gatherer looking for stuff to eat that will keep you going, a snail is one of them. It's kind of thought that they weren't really eaten until the Upper Paleolithic. Apparently it's to do with like people were probably like hunting, focusing on hunting bigger animals and stuff at that point. But at that point there seems to be a sort of a bit of an explosion in the variety of diet and stuff. Um and I actually found several articles that were talking about this. Because of the presence of a lot of snail middens. So a midden, if you've not come across one, is like a big rubbish heap.
It
Um,
it's a historical landfill.
yeah, and often you come across middens that are like entirely one kind of thing, which is quite exciting and probably shows there was a lot of eating of that thing. Um, so we get snail middens, and they appear kind of almost all over the world. Um, I couldn't find that much on the Americas. Um, but certainly in Europe, in Africa, and a little bit in Asia, they're being consumed, I think, in sort of the Pacific region, New Zealand as well. Um, there's only a few types of snail that are edible. So they tend to be sort of the same kind of snail. One of these, and as far as I can gather, is the earliest evidence for snail exploitation for food, is in Spain. Um, and this is about 10,000 years previous to evidence for snail like mass consumption in Morocco, France, Italy, and the Balkans, which where there's evidence for like other eating of snails. And this is because of the presence of like just a lot of snail shells.
I think
Um,
because of what I looked at when I was doing undergrad, I know that there's a lot of middens at, Skara Brae and sort of Orkney in general. Are there
mhm.
snails up there, or is it more sort of warmer areas?
Um, it seems like the earliest ones that we can find are kind of in the Mediterranean. So there's a couple in Spain, in Cantabria, and the oldest one in a place called Cova de la Barriada, where they found large concentrated amounts of snail shells along with other animal remains, in pits that were apparently used for cooking. And that's dated to about 30,000 years before present, which is 1950, because that's the present in archaeological terms. But still, like a pretty long time ago. And that's just about the earliest evidence we have, as far as I have been able to find, for like large amounts of snail consumption. And that's about 10,000 years before the evidence, for snail consumption in sort of other parts of Europe, in the Balkans, and more northerly, and in Morocco as well. Um,
I guess it makes sense, but that's I don't know, whenever you see numbers like that, it's just like, "That was so long ago!"
oh yeah,
Like, it's still a thing, and it was so long ago.
that's so. I mean, yeah, like that's the Upper Paleolithic. Um,
Paleo diet includes snails confirmed.
we're building the paleo diet one step at a time. But yeah, it absolutely did include snails, according to this. There's also evidence of them, I'm not sure about being eaten in sub-Saharan Africa, at around similar kind of times, but also being used as ornamentation, so like making beads out of snail shells, um, which there is also evidence of in Britain and in Western Europe, being used as like ornamentation. These are land snails, by the way, that I'm mostly talking about. Sea snails have been eaten as well, but I didn't seem to see any particular evidence of like large sea snail consumption. So I'm I'm gonna sort of suggest maybe that was a regional thing, because I know people do eat sea snails. Like winkles are still fairly popular in Britain in like coastal areas, like tiny sea snails.
They are delicious as well.
They are, yeah. But yeah, it seems to be mostly certain kinds, the edible kinds of land snails, that are being consumed in prehistory, sometimes in quite large quantities, as evidenced by these snail middens, which is just it's quite exciting.
Hmm.
um, apparently, there was like some debate over whether or not they were being used for food, but because so many have been found, like in with other animal remains and with other things related to cooking, And some deposits of like snail shells have been found appearing to be roasted. So I feel like that makes it kind of obvious.
So we're thinking that it's kind of the kitchen waste midden.
Yeah. So interestingly, apparently, they managed to determine these snail shells had been roasted using like high resolution microscopes to look at the minerals that were
Oh,
on the
that's
shells.
cool.
It's so sciencey and cool. Is your little bioarchaeology heart happy?
It makes my BSc happy, yes.
I'm just a weak and wobbly BA. So yeah, we have pretty strong evidence to say that it was part of the hunter-gatherer and early agricultural diet in prehistory. And we know that snails as food remained fairly popular because we still see that in kind of ancient times. So there was a Hellenic colony in the Middle East where they found the remains of like a single feast. This is dated to 150 BC. And they found the remains of what appears to be just like a single feast, where they included snails along with the other remains of the feast. And it's also fairly well documented in Roman literature. Um,
I
so
have
the
heard of
Romans
the Romans
actually,
eating them.
sorry?
I have heard of the Romans eating them.
Yeah, so the
Feeding them
Romans,
salty milk to fatten them up.
yeah, the Romans had snail farms. Hesil- Heliciculture is the word for the practice of snail farming.
I
I
like that.
love
It's probably the safest kind of farming to do.
it. Maybe so, yeah.
Like
There's
a
like
snail
no.
isn't gonna trample you.
Maybe if you're Sean Bean, it will happen.
What?
Oh, he gets trampled by a herd of cows in one of his many film deaths. I
I
just
thought there
feel
was a
like, you know.
film where he gets killed by snails that I'd missed.
I would watch that movie. The one where Sean Bean fights the angry giant snail. Halloween blockbuster, just saying. But yeah, in in the Roman Empire, snails were pretty much in demand, as evidenced by the presence of snail farms. I'm going to say it wrong again, probably because I've forgotten, but Pliny the Elder?
Pliny.
Oh my god, I always pick the wrong one. I always feel like Pliny is the wrong one, but I don't know why.
Because there's only one N. The rules of English
Mm.
mean it should be Pliny, but the rules of English are stupid and don't and inconsistent.
We know this.
And also, he's not English.
So Pliny the Elder talks about heliciculture being practiced on the estate of a guy called Fluvius Hirpinius in 50 AD. This is in Italy. And apparently he fed his snails with wine and meat, which I assume would make them taste better. I don't know. But I think that shows that there was a pretty big demand in the Roman Empire.
Mm.
Hmm. Um, and then there have been mentions of snails throughout later history as well. Um, a lot of the ones I've been able to find come from France, which I think would add to this idea of French cuisine being associated with snails. Um, although they are definitely not the only modern like food culture to have snails in it, which I will get to later as well. But apparently in France in the Middle Ages, the snail trade was monopolized by the monasteries, which is kind of hilarious. I don't know, like I
It's
always
something
think
to do.
I always think of monasteries as like um brewing beer or spirits or like wool farming or something, but the idea of lots of monks tending a snail farm is just
It's kind of the dream.
I know. Become a monk, nobody bothers you. You just get to like spend time alone and tend to some snails all day and live in a nice house. Um yeah, so apparently snails were proclaimed a kind of fish so that they can still be eaten during Lent.
Oh yeah, there's I think it's parts of the southwest. There's wallfish is like a slang for snails.
Really? That is fantastic. I love that that's still a thing. Wolfish.
Yeah.
So apparently they're being called escargots as early as the 14th century, which kind of surprised me. Escargot, it turns out, just means edible snail, as opposed to unedible snails, which I think have a different word in French.
Hmm.
Um, and there is some advice for cooking them in the 14th century, which advises to collect them in the morning, wash them in salt and vinegar, and then cook them. In 1543, a small book was written by a guy called Etienne de Laigues, called Noteworthy Treatise Concerning the Properties of Turtles, Snails, Frogs, and Artichokes. Now, one of these things is not like the others.
Hey, interesting choice,
Apparently, he wasn't all that keen on the eating of all of these animals and art
including
and
the
plants.
animal, the artichoke.
Yeah.
Is
But
that
he
why it's
does.
in there? It's just four things he didn't like.
This is just a collection of all the edible things I don't like.
I don't know, picky eaters.
So, yeah, he doesn't seem to like snails being eaten as food. A quote is, "I know snails are ugly, but not so hideous as turtles, nor so vile, and nothing like as poisonous. I also know that the ancients ate them, but I can't accept people's eating them daily, since other foods are more nourishing and of better substance."
I have two qualms with this.
Go on.
Food is not fuel, and I resent the
Mm-hmm.
implication. Poisonous turtles?
Yeah, I don't know anything about turtle toxicity, so I can't comment on that.
I mean, it's if it is a thing, it's certainly not a widely known thing. I'm googling poisonous turtle right now. I have to know.
I would like to know as well. But he does note that they're apparently beneficial for stomach illnesses. So there you go.
There are no poisonous turtles and there are no known venomous turtles.
Oh, get wrecked, Etienne. I don't know what turtles he was eating.
Maybe he just got food poisoning from one once and then doesn't like them anymore.
Maybe, yeah, I just had a grudge against turtles and artichokes.
The artichokes are still boggling me.
Mm. But yeah, apparently snails are pretty good for curing stomach illness. Um, I don't know the reasoning behind that. I
I
couldn't
mean,
find
half
anything
the
about that
time
at
there
all.
isn't any, let's be honest.
But yeah, maybe someone ate a snail once and got better and was like, "Oh, it must have been the snail."
I like to imagine when people say things like that, there's just a physician in the corner shaking their head.
So it seems like the snails got a little bit unfashionable for a while. Um, you don't really hear about them. I didn't find mentions in like any of the sort of popular cookbooks from like 18th 19th century really. Um Although it seems like they hang on as, like, kind of a rustic food,
Mhm.
as they have all over the world, really.
Which is
Um,
presumably why Mendip Wallfish is a thing.
mm,
It's I think it's Somerset? I know it's Southwest. I think it's Somerset.
okay. Wait, is that a place?
The Mendips?
Oh, yeah, no, I thought, like, Mendip Wallfish was a village or something. It wouldn't surprise me. This is the
Oh, no, is this with 'cause, saying about Wallfish still being a regional, like, slang term.
uh-huh. Yeah,
Mendip
yeah.
Wallfish is like, you go to Somerset and you eat some snails.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, it seems like a lot of places have, like, regional snail cuisine, as it were.
That
Um,
is very cool.
yeah, in fact, there are actually records of, like, families of peasants being poisoned by snails and things like that.
That's
Um,
not cool.
yeah, I mean, they're not if prepared properly, they're safe to eat. But it can be about eating the right kind of snail. Because even the right kinds of snail, if they're wild, can have like nematodes and stuff inside, like
Gross.
poisonous parasites and things. Yeah. Um, interestingly, when I was looking at the articles to do with snail middens and stuff, I did also find one from the Journal of Nematology entitled "My Favorite Nematode," which I just like. I love academics.
Actually, thinking about it, I do remember having to regularly give our dog preventative worming treatments because he loved to eat slugs and snails.
Oh, that sounds sensible. Yeah, so I would not recommend to anyone to just go pick snails out of the garden and start cooking them because you could get nematodes inside you, and you probably don't want those. They can be fatal, or at least like very uncomfortable. Um, but yeah, most snails consumed, like in the present day, are farmed snails, and they're sort of prepared in a special way. So you know what's in the snail, I guess. But wild snails are, yeah, probably tricky. But it seems like, at least in the 19th century in Europe, the snails kind of came back as a fancy thing this time.
Is that because French?
Possibly so. I mean, apparently there's records of them being served to the Tsar of Russia when he visited Paris. As like a, special dish. But like there's quite a few Victorian, I suppose not Victorian because it's France, but there's quite a few like 19th century recipes and adverts and stuff. Um and I think this is when it gets really associated with France as like l'escargot.
Interesting.
Um because it seems like it didn't come back in the same way in other countries in Europe. Although they are still eaten in Portugal and Spain and other places as well, but it seems like it came back in certain countries and not in others. But it's fancy now.
It is fancy. It's one of those things that's, like, fancy, but also a lot of people go, "Oh, that's kinda gross," which I always find really interesting, like oysters and that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never been able to get the hang of oysters. Um, not that it's an average thing that I consider buying, but, they just look really kind of slimy. Um, although I have eaten snails. Um,
Yeah,
what
I'm
I've
the other way around.
Okay.
I have had frog's legs though, so I feel like I'm halfway there. I just I just need to find somewhere I can get snails so I can try them.
You're halfway to being a stereotypical French person.
I I
Um
I do love garlic and Bastille Day.
That's not what I thought you were gonna say.
Just the general concept, you know?
So, I think one of the main reasons for snails being like a fancy dish now in Europe anyway is because they kind of have to use the farmed snails. By that point they'd worked out that eating wild snails is not great for you. Um, and so the snails needed to be farmed and like taken care of in a certain way, and that
Mhm.
will cost money. So the snails are, if you have them in a restaurant, they're expensive now and stuff like that. Yeah. So you have to get like the organic snail. So apparently in France today they're still considered kind of a special occasion thing. Um Like, you can buy snails in cans with the shells as well, like, on the side, because it's quite popular to cook them and then put them back in the shell with a dressing or something. Um, so yeah, they're still quite popular apparently, but kind of a special occasion thing. Um, and they are still eaten, like, you can get them in the UK as well, probably not in a can, but in a restaurant. They're pretty popular. I think France is the the one of the biggest like consumers of snails for food. But
I
Portugal
mean,
isn't that far
that's not that
behind.
surprising.
Mm. Um, yeah, Portugal isn't that far behind, and Spain as well. Apparently there are some quite well-known Catalonian dishes that use snails kind of cooked in their shells. Um, yeah, and around the Mediterranean, I think it remains kind of a popular food. And elsewhere in the world as well. So I ate snails for the first time in Vietnam, and it was served with like a they were served like in the shell, with a spicy sauce on the side, and it was really delicious actually.
Did you have those tiny little forks?
No, I think you just use like a pin thing.
Okay, it's like a
Are there
little spike.
are there snail forks?
I mean, do you not remember the list from the forks episode? There's a fork for everything.
But yeah, snails kind of tasty in my opinion. Oysters, maybe not.
I stand by a smoked oyster.
Okay.
They're not
Yeah,
as slimy.
I think stuff like this is a very much to your own taste kind of deal.
Oh, yeah. Like, I would
Um,
never judge anyone for not liking
mm.
the food.
Oh, but by the way, snail caviar is now more expensive than fish caviar. People eat snail legs.
Hmm,
Apparently, they are very expensive and luxurious.
but do they taste good?
I don't know.
Like, that's
And I'm
always
not.
my first question with these things is does it actually taste good?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine, but maybe I don't know. I can't find anything mentioning them being eaten in the past, but who knows? I don't know. Someone fancy eat them and then write us an email. But yeah, that is a. I was trying to make a pun about like a potted history of snails, but make it about a shell, but it doesn't really work. So that's all my snail information for today.
That's snails in the nutshell.
Ah,
No.
no, it's the wrong shell.
There aren't enough snail idioms.
There aren't. There really aren't. That is something that we should remedy later. I'm sure no one wants to listen to like 2 hours of us trying to come up with snail puns.
Unless, they sign up to the Patreon and ask for that episode. £10 a month, we make any episode you want. Hint, hint.
Hello, I'm Mod Pencil from Probably Bad RPG Ideas. if you'd like to hear discussions of ideas such as what if in my urban fantasy game magic turns out to not be real, and what is the best rules for an ogre, then listen to the Probably Bad podcast, which is available on everywhere podcasts are and also YouTube. Or check out our Tumblr and Twitter.
So, what are we talking about the local larder today?
Um, I wanted to talk about fermented milk.
Oh,
Because I've seen people talking about it a lot as a superfood lately.
oh, really? I'm clearly not in the news spaces enough. What is it about fermented milk that's meant to be so good?
Um, Supposedly, it is very good for your gut microbiome.
Okay.
So the main kind is called kefir,
I've heard of that.
which is milk fermented with kefir grains.
Okay. What is kefir? What is it, kind of like cereal or?
Yeah, it's just a kind of cereal grain,
Okay.
which grows especially around the Northern Caucasus and the Balkans.
Mhm.
So kefir, which refers to the grains and also the actual drink, but the drink itself is kind of a yogurty texture,
Okay. Yeah, when I
although
worked in the supermarket, we had it next to the yogurt section. So I
yeah,
thought it was yogurt, but apparently not.
it does share a lot of it shares a lot of microbes with things like Activia, a lot of the lactobacillus. There's a
Okay.
lot of overlap, um, and the sort of general like help your bowels kind of yogurt drinks.
Mhm.
But yeah, so like I said, this it comes from the Caucasus, and um, yeah, so you made it in traditionally goat skin bags, which you would
Okay.
just sort of hang by the door, and anyone going past would hit it, or you could go out and hit it yourself to keep the milk and the grains mixed together.
That sounds kind of fun.
I feel like it would be good boxing practice, honestly,
Yeah, I'll just go and beat up the milk.
because I mean it's a leather bag; it's gonna hold, right?
So I guess you'd hope so.
Well, it's like how you get water-weighted punching bags. I feel like it would be a similar vibe, honestly.
Mhm.
So because of this, it was known as a wineskin, like in areas like Western Russia and the Afyonkarahisar province in Turkey.
Okay.
It's very basically known by different local words for wineskin,
Oh,
and the idea was spread around Russia, Eastern Europe, right the way to Japan, actually. Mostly, interestingly, from the late 19th centuries when it kind of took off as a thing, beyond, a local thing.
mhm.
But right back in the 18th century, you had people talking about it being this great health drink.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's not just like a new superfood.
Oh, no, and there was whole things of, like kind of like with sourdough starters being passed down, you'd have people passing down their kefir culture
Oh, wow.
down through the family, and, in the Northern Caucasus it's still a taboo against sharing your family's culture because it makes ancestral spirits angry,
Oh, wow.
and there's these kind of elaborate, "Oh, I'm totally stealing your grains," kind of things to try and trick these spirits if you want to share it with someone. Um,
Fantastic. I love how people always find a way around that kind of stuff.
It's great. But there's a full-on, I'm not gonna get into it now, but if you look up, Irina Timofeevna Sakharova,
Okay.
there's a whole, like, heist around getting these kefir grains for a medical company at the start of the 20th century so they can start, like, producing kefir at a more industrial level for sale. And she was actually praised by the Minister of Food in the Soviet Union in the 1970s for bringing kefir to Russia.
Okay. Was it like smuggled out of the country?
Basically, like, there's marriage plots involved. Like I said, I'm not gonna get into it because I feel like it's a whole thing on its own,
Yeah,
but
that sounds like a
everyone should
whole
look up
story.
Irina Sakharova.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so it's also seen as a better way to ingest dairy, which obviously has some good things for you because it's lower in lactose,
Mhm.
'cause, it gets broken down to lactic acid by the bacteria during fermentation, which apparently makes it taste buttery.
Ooh, delicious science.
Mm. It also lasts longer than regular milk because it has a slight alcohol content.
Oh, wow. Can
Traditionally
you
about what traditionally about 1 to 2%, so it would take a lot to get drunk. You'd probably have
Okay.
other problems at that point.
So you can't really get drunk off yogurt.
No, plus, like I said, that would be a lot of dairy to have in a sitting, a lot of tart tasting, very, very slightly fizzy, dare I say effervescent, um, thin yogurt.
It's true actually. I feel like being drunk would probably be the least of your problems at that point.
But there have been some studies that show that it can reduce, rheumatoid arthritis, like, it has slight anti-inflammatory properties.
Oh, wow.
You can also make it with water, but it doesn't have as many beneficial properties,
Mhm.
apparently, which I don't really know enough about the science to go further on that, but I think it's interesting.
Hmm.
But there's also a fermented milk drink which pops up in Kazakhstan and Mongolia and was apparently drunk by Genghis Khan, called
Okay, so
Kumis.
I think I've heard of this.
Yeah, so this is fermented mare's milk,
Ow.
which again you would keep in bags, in this case, kind of hung off your saddle, and people would hit it as they went past to help, like, agitate it for fermenting.
Wow.
Which I love that that's just a thing. It's like, "Hey, punch my milk bag, it'll help me out."
You punch my milk, I'll punch yours.
But it was really good sort of traveling food because obviously you could ride a lactating horse and then milk it and ferment that and just keep that cycle going.
Yeah, that sounds like a really handy method of production.
And specifically, you would want to ferment it before you drank it because apparently mare's milk can be a laxative
Oh,
because it has so much lactose in it that even if you have lactase persistence, it can cause you some downstairs problems.
okay.
But what
Noted.
but once it's fermented, you can give it to babies, and people do give it to babies
Wow.
because again, it's very low alcohol,
Mhm.
kind of a similar level to kefir. So yeah, it's just I just find it interesting that because I think we're kind of odd about milk that isn't from a cow in especially Western Europe, I think, was kind of like even that I know people who will not eat sheep's milk cheese because like only cow's milk, which
Okay.
you're already using milk from another animal. Why is that where you draw the line, you know?
Yeah, I suppose that's a bit strange. I mean, I can see people like not realizing that you can drink milk from other animals and stuff, but cheese, I mean, hmm. I guess goat's milk is one that is a bit more popular.
But it's still a thing that a lot of people will look at and go, "Oh, I don't know."
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, apparently in Eastern Europe, you've got horse's milk and fermented milk, and you're just like,
Wow.
"Yeah, I'll drink that. I'll give that to my baby. I'll drink that on the road."
Cool.
I just find that really interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, apparently, at least the kefir, I can't see anything about health benefits of kumis beyond it makes the mare's milk not a laxative anymore. But yeah, apparently kefir could be a similar thing too. Like I say, things like Activia and Yoplait, not Yoplait, Activia and Yakults as just like a general bowel health drink, which I find quite interesting.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
So
I kind of wanna go try it now.
yeah, I'm tempted to get some next time I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, a good thing about these kind of things becoming popular is that, like, I'm guessing you probably wouldn't have been able to get that in the UK, like, a couple of decades ago.
Not
Um,
until relatively recently, no.
yeah, but, I mean, yeah, like I said, I've seen it in supermarkets recently, so,
Mm.
yeah, I'm gonna pop down and get some, give it a try.
So thank you for listening. Like I said, we do have a Patreon, Bread and Thread, as well as that £10 amount. At £1, you get access to the Bread and Thread Discord, where we talk about things we've been cooking and making. And for £5, you get monthly recipes. October's recipe was garlic soup.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a soup that makes me very happy.
Oh, yes. You can also email us at breadandthreadpodcast@gmail.com if you've got any comments or ideas on things that we should do an episode on next or anything like that. Or if you want to tell us how snail caviar tastes.
You can also contact us on Twitter or Tumblr, both as Bread and Thread, and
And
we're on YouTube as Bread and Thread.
I think that is all of our things.
That is all of our things.
Cool. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.